Wine Library TV. I am your host, Gary Vaynerchuk, and this, my friends, is the Thunder Show, aka the internet's most passionate wine program. And as you can see, the joint has been classed up because one of the finest guys that I've met in the wine industry. We got to spend time together in Houston.
Yes, it was
this
a lot of
one really
fun.
got to know each other. One of the guys that is widely recognized, has an amazingly interesting story. I think we're going to kind of talk about a lot of different things here today, but I'm very happy and thrilled to have George Tabor here today. I appreciate it, my friend. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
On Thunder Show, George, of course, probably in the wine world, most known for The Judgment of Paris, being the, how did you feel, to see a guy playing you in a movie?
Really weird.
Right?
Really weird. Especially since the guy was about 40 years older than I was at that time. And he just
And
kind of
heavier,
sat there,
right?
heavier,
I was like,
and he just kind of sat there and mumbled. He didn't talk, he mumbled.
Well, if you don't know who George is, I'm going to let him explain to you where his passion for wine comes in. We're going to kind of keep this fun. I'm starting to get a new kind of vibe with guests where, when instead of maybe doing the same old thing where with George, we could have, how many blind replications of The Judgment of Paris tastings have you done in your career?
Hundreds, I think.
Hundreds, right?
I did one last night.
So
But they're fun. They're always fun.
I'm sure, but for me, I think we'll yap a little bit about maybe some of your other interests in wine. I know closures and other things, and so I definitely want to talk about that. And we do have two wines from California that were represented in that tasting: Chalon and Freemark Abbey. We'll taste our current releases, see what we think about those. Let's actually get into the first wine now, and then I'll give you the platform. George, this is Chalon 2005 Chardonnay. This wine rolls in at 21 U.S. bones. It's rated 87 points Wine Spectre, and the thing that caught me off guard is how much this product has gone down in price. This used to be a $30, $35 Chardonnay 10 years ago.
I don't understand that. I mean, it has a new owner of the winery, but I think they're still making very good wine.
We're about to find out, but why don't, before we get into the wine, why don't you tell the Vaniacs out there who might not be familiar with you, how you got into the wine world, how that tasting, changed things, and what you've done. I'm fascinated. I don't really know, after Judgment of Paris, how much writing you did in our space, in the wine space. So why don't you give a little history lesson of who you are?
Okay, great. I was a guy that was a Time magazine correspondent in Paris in 1976, and I was damn lucky. That's all it was. It was just pure luck. I was the only
Luck is awesome.
Yes, count on it. But I was the only journalist that was present when there was this tasting, a blind tasting between California and French wines. The judges were all French judges, the most eminent judges. The French wines were the most famous. The California wines were totally unknown wines. Some of the wines that were at the Paris tasting was only the second year that they'd ever been making wines. And they were up against places like Chateau Aubriand that's been in business for 300 years. At the end of the day, though, the California wines won.
To put in perspective for a lot of the new viewers who have, maybe seen what do they call it?
Bottle shock.
Bottle shock, thank you. Would you say wines from, let's say, Ohio right now had the same acclaim? What would you compare California wine's esteem at that time compared to maybe the world now? Would you compare it to the Virginia wine scene? Would you consider it to the New Jersey wine? I mean, where would, on your field, where would you compare it to?
California wines at that point were considered basically to be a rot gut.
Right.
I mean, it was not, there's nothing but, Ripple with that ring-a-ding flavor, and,
right.
Gallo Hardy Burgundy.
So
Not certainly wines of any quality. They were the Rodney Dangerfield of world wines. They didn't get any respect.
Would you say that they were even below what people today may think of the wines from Virginia or
Absolutely.
Ohio? Even below that?
Yeah, even below that.
So, wines from, Sri Lanka.
Yeah, exactly. That's not a bad example.
Sri Lanka,
or maybe from Georgia.
Yeah, the Republic of Georgia. Well, the Republic of Georgia makes some serious dessert wines.
Yeah, but you don't get them around here very much.
No, that's for sure. Okay, so
and it was very similar. You couldn't get California wines in Paris at that time.
You really still can't. So you're there. How many people are at this tasting?
Total of everybody in total was maybe 15.
Right.
There were 9 judges, myself, a couple of hangers-on from the guy who staged it, from his wine shop, and we just sat around, and a couple of guys to pour the wines. That was it.
Did you feel a sense? And I kind of knew that, and I think the movie shows maybe 50, but it wasn't really even that. Do you get a sense that, for me, I don't think people realize this was a very intimate, small gathering. I mean, not unlike the tastings that a lot of people have today, obviously, with some big folks in the wine world at the time. Did you get a sense at any point that they kind of didn't want this to get out there?
I'm
so fascinated by that.
Not so much
Like,
because I think most of them didn't even realize what was happening. It was about halfway through the tasting that I got the reason. First
You
of all,
got the white results first.
I got the white results first. But first of all, it's really important to remember why I was the only journalist who was there that day. Everybody else was smarter than I was, but because everybody else thought the California wines obviously were going to get killed by French wines against California wines. Forget it. So the
waste of time.
A waste of time. It's a waste of time story. So nobody showed up except stupid George Tabor who said, "Hey, why not? I don't have anything better to do."
Did you have a lot of wine experience at that point?
No, I'd lived in Europe at that point for close to 11 years. In Germany, Switzerland, Belgium. So I was into a wine culture, but I wasn't a wine expert.
Sure.
I had actually taken Stephen Spurrier, the guy who staged the event. He had a wine school in Paris, and I had taken his introduction to French wine. That's in effect why I got there, because the end of the day, or just before the event, nobody was coming. No press was coming. This was supposed to be a press event. No press was coming. So he picked up the phone and said, "Look, you took our wine course. Couldn't you please come?" And so I said, "Okay. If I don't have anything more important to do."
And what's scary for people to understand, you think back to 30 years ago plus, Time Magazine was. I mean, you're talking about an important. It's important today. Well, you go back pre-internet, pre-400 trillion channels, pre-all this other distractions. I mean, you're talking about a monster of a publication.
No, at that point, there's no question about it. But one of the things that in Paris in those days, and I was very lucky, is that the president of France had learned to speak English by reading Time Magazine. So we had an in to the president of France the whole time I was there. I mean,
this is like being on the front page of Google.
Impact.
Yeah. So you're there. They don't even really realize. I mean, do they even know the results? The judges? Did you ever tell them at the end?
Oh no, they told the judges the results. In fact, I interviewed 6 of the 9 judges immediately after the event. Immediately after the event, to a person, the judges said the California wines. In fact, we got to give them a lot of credit. They were pretty good, but they also said the red wines. It's much too early to be drinking the red wines because our red wines, or the French red wines, were only 5 and 6 years old, and so on. It was basically, the old Brooklyn cheer, wait till next year, wait till next year. Well, they kept waiting for next year for 30 years, and it never got any better.
So you didn't feel at any point that they wanted to squash the story? That you didn't feel you didn't feel your life was in danger at any point?
Well, no.
Because I'll be honest with you, if I was one of the judges and it was my hometown, I would have been like, listen, only Tabor's here. Let's take him out, and who'll ever know? That's a little Jersey action right there. Right. Or Russian,
No, nobody decided to take me out. Stephen Spurrier, on the other hand, he had real problems. He was considered persona non grata for many years in France because of that. And, he would... they'd march him out of wineries. In fact, one winery went in, and the owner of the winery came up and said, "Mr. Spurrier, we invited you into our country, and then you spat in our soup. Perfidious Albion!"
No, I know the stories. I mean, it's absurd.
And
I kind of like it.
So it was just shock for the French.
You still lived in Paris when the issue comes out.
The issue came out. I was living in Paris.
Did you realize what was happening in the U.S.? I mean, did a lot of newspapers pick up how it got crazy there?
It did get crazy, but it didn't get crazy in France because the French press totally ignored it.
Oh, really?
They didn't publish any stories about this until about 3 months afterwards, and then the only stories they published were dumping on it, saying how crazy it is. I mean, the tasting was...
A fluke.
It was a fluke. It was poorly organized, and they didn't know how to run it, and, all that.
Sure.
Sour grapes.
Sour grapes. And so from there, what happens in your life?
I actually went off to a totally different career.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
right?
I was a business editor of Time Magazine. I started a newspaper here in New Jersey.
Is that right?
Called NJ Biz. It's
a
weekly business.
I didn't know that.
Yep, I started that.
Awesome.
Sold it in 2005.
Nice.
And now I'm just concentrating on wine.
So what brought you back to the wine scene then?
I was brought back to the wine scene really by the 20th anniversary. The time of the 20th anniversary of the Paris tasting.
96.
96. The Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. put 2 bottles, the winning white wine and the winning red wine, into the permanent collection. This is
insane, right?
Among artifacts.
Gergich Hills, right? The Gergich Hills.
No. Gergich made the wine, but Chateau Montelena was the winery.
By the way, the way they handled that in Bottle Shock was lame city.
That was badly done. But so I went out to this tasting They had also had an event in Napa, and I talked to the winemakers, and it was at that point that it really hit me, that had been the turning point in the history of California wine. Before that, as I said, California wines were the Rodney Dangerfield of wine. After that, they suddenly had respect.
From 76 to 96, how many times does this article get brought up in your life?
It's always. Well, actually,
you know what I mean?
Well,
I feel like in 82, it would be like not be talked about.
It's constantly brought up, but not in my life as much because the Time magazine story didn't have a byline on it. Nobody knew who had written the story.
No kidding.
It was only when I wrote my book, Judgment of Paris, that finally it was recognized that I was the only journalist who was there that day. The story that appeared in Time magazine was really understated. It was only 4 paragraphs long. 4 paragraphs. It was stuck way in the back of the paper.
Did you realize there was a lot of craziness going on? Because ended up what happening was a lot of people regurgitated, a lot of newspapers rewrote about it, and it just kept going, right?
Frank Pryal, who was the New York Times wine critic in those days, for the next 2 weeks, he did his column just on the Paris tasting. First he did it on the white wines, and the second week he did it on the red wines. It was a big thing.
But you had no feel of that in
Paris.
Paris.
Really have the feel because,
nobody from Time called you and said, hey, this story's really buzzing.
Yeah. No. I mean, but it did buzz. I mean, the day after the story came out, wine stores are all around the country.
Oh, I know.
Oh, there was a run on those wines. Not just the 2 wines that had won at Paris, but any wines that had been even in the Paris competition.
Even if they were like the worst of the bunch.
Yeah, because
like
they were because they were great values.
Sure.
I mean, the red wine that won at Paris, Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, was selling in the United States then for $7.50 a bottle. Chateau Mouton Rothschild, which came in second, was selling for $25 a bottle.
Sure.
It doesn't take a lot of brains to start buying the wine that won at Paris rather than the second wine.
Did the tasting, the aftermath, at all impact your own personal wine drinking from that point on? Did you start getting more into wine, or again, was it just this moment in time and you moved on to the business stuff and,
Yeah, I mean, I always, after I left Paris, I've always drunk, wine at every dinner, every night at home. We have lots of wine around. I really enjoy wine and the story of it and all that. But I really didn't get into seriously working in it until I started working on the book.
Right.
That was in 96. And then it took me a long time to write it because I was running a business here in New Jersey, and so I was writing the middle of the night, weekends, vacations, all that.
And how was that experience writing this book?
It was great. I mean, there are 4 main characters in the book. Warren Minarski, the guy who made the red wine that won, and was also he was the winemaker and owner. Mike Gergich made the wine, the white wine that won for Chateau Montelena. Jim Barrett is the owner of that, and then Stephen Spurrier, who's a very nice and interesting guy.
You keep in touch?
Yes. Oh yeah, we email all the time.
Awesome. Let's get into the first wine, and then we'll continue the conversation. Mott, zoom in one more time. Why not? Kicks and giggles. Chalon 2005 Chardonnay. How did that do off the top? Do you remember how this did?
It was kind of in the middle of the ranks. Yep. Stevens thought actually this wine would do pretty well. That was his favorite
going into it,
not favorite to win because he thought the French wines were going to win.
But he thought this coming third and fourth.
Well, he thought it would show the best of the whites.
So let's see what's going on with the 05. Let's give it a snippy sniff.
Yeah.
So you get a little subtle oak on the nose. Yeah. Not too bad. No oak monster here. No, I don't need to get into George's face and scare him with the oak monster. I also get a little bit of an apple core on the nose, which I like quite a bit, but a subtle oakiness, which is, not too over the top, a little more classic Chardonnay in that style. Yeah. So not bad on the nose. I'm going to give it a whirl now. What do you think's going on there? How do you like it so far?
I like it. I think he's held back. They've had several winemakers in there, and they've had a little bit of inconsistency over the years because they've been switching so much. I think they're now owned by Diageo, aren't they? And they're kind of going with a mass market with they have another line of wines, Monterey County,
$10 kind of stuff, $12 kind of stuff.
Yeah, but this is a really unusual winery in that it's way up in the hills, way up. And it's the end of the road.
I got worried when I went there, a decade ago.
Much so. It's an appellation where there is only one winery in the appellation.
That's right. That's right.
And it was one of the early wineries in the 1960s and 70s that was starting to make outstanding wines. And so when
And really trying to.
Really trying to. They had a winemaker, the Dick Graff by name, who was really a legend in California at that point. Unfortunately, he died in an airplane accident.
Yeah, no, I know.
But he was a great guy. He was a very good friend of Julia Childs. Julia Childs would come to his winery, and she said that wine there was the first wine outside of France that she had really enjoyed.
That's a neat little tip, a nice little. I mean, she was pretty. I mean,
sure.
I mean, you know her well or no?
No, I never.
But she was a big personality.
Oh,
big.
boy.
I mean, she really started the whole phenomenon of celebrity chefs.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. And she started the thing of bringing good food and wine to the United States.
You know, I always hear her salt story. I'm kind of into sea salt, and anytime I get into any kind of nerd sea salt conversations, everybody's like, I know where you're going. She would, bring it here and show it on television. People were like, what? Not the regular table salt, you know?
And she used to drink wine on the show.
Yeah.
Some people thought she drank a little too much wine sometimes.
She could get a little too. We have a show like that coming up, don't we, Mott? Next week. We taped yesterday. So to me, this wine gets a little hot. I think the alcohol gets a little hair away from this wine. It's pretty oaky on the palate. So if you're bothered or thrown off by oak, it's there. I wouldn't call it the oak monster, so it's not over the top. I would say it's a little disjointed. I do like the apple core flavor. I think the Spectator kind of nailed this one, in my opinion. I think it is an 87 type point wine. I do like the fact that the price has gone down. When you think about, I mean, this wine was $30 when I first started working for my dad's store. 1992. I mean, a lot of things have gone up. So, from a value play, it's done a good job. That being said, there's a lot of, Chablis that you can buy in this price point. There's other ways you can go with the Chardonnay grape that I think may be more interesting than this effort. But, it's a little goopy for me. Do you find it a little viscous on the back end?
Yeah. But I just think it's a value, And, there aren't many good values in wines these days.
I don't disagree. And I definitely would say that it's not... You have your own here. This helmet. Don't let the helmet. Don't let the helmet trick you. Now, as we pour the red, let's zoom in. Probably zoom in twice. Oh, the label's nice now. They got the puffy. Freemark Abbey 2004 Cabernet Sauvignon, $27, 90 points. Robert Parker, and made by Ted Edwards, who I think is a very good winemaker. I'm going to give you a little rinse here. Now, you wrote a second book. That we have on the table, right?
The second book is on the great. What is probably the hottest topic, the most argued topic in the wine world today, which is how do you seal a bottle of wine? With a natural cork, a plastic cork, a screw cap. I know not many people see Zork, the plastic, the glass stoppers.
Yes.
So there are a lot of different ways.
And so how was this book? So this is what we have. No, so how was that to write? I mean, there was a lot of emotion behind Closures,
the emotion,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people, it's like discussing religion. I mean,
it's true. No, I mean
people get really hot under the collar on this thing. But what I decided actually going in was that I wasn't going to take a position. I thought there was too much heat, a little hot, like your wine, the last one. And so I thought it was important to step back and just really try to tell the story of what the debate is all about, what the history is all about. And I found the history to be personally absolutely fascinating. The way cork was used for 1,000 years, between 500 BC and 500 AD. 1,000 years they used cork. And then for the next 1,000 years, they didn't use cork after they came up with the wooden barrel, which was originally developed in Switzerland. And then about 1600, they reinvented the cork or rediscovered the cork when they came up with bottles like that. They were called English bottles, and it was the first rigid bottle, that was rugged and could be shipped. And they needed a way to close it, and so that's when they came up with the cork.
After going through this process and being on tour and doing signings and everything, where do you feel the pulse of America is on Closures?
I think, well,
not your emotional standpoint, but your summary of where you've garnished a lot of feedback, and you're probably a walking R&D on this, research and development on this. So what would you say?
I won't put you to sleep on R&D, I promise.
I like the R&D. That's why I answer all my email. That's where all the action happens. Where do you feel the pulse is right now?
Right now in the United States, it's still a rather conservative country. What's really interesting, which I found very interesting at least, that as you went around the world, it varies from national market to national market. Australia, New Zealand, they're 95% screw caps.
They're doing Tetra Pak. Like the Sips. Yeah. I mean, they're crazy about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you just can't find in New Zealand or Australia a bottle of wine with a cork in it anymore.
It's hard.
You know, it's just. Well, you go to Australia, you go to France, it's 95% cork, just the opposite. The United States is a traditional market, I think, in wine in a lot of ways. I think
agree.
probably because the United States, Americans are not comfortable yet.
Self-esteem,
They don't have enough self-confidence to say,
Preach it, George.
I like that wine, I hate that wine.
Say it.
You know, they are going back and saying, let's wait, let's stay with cork. Even though a lot of them may have had bad experiences with it, but there's no question in my mind, cork has gotten a lot better in the last 10 years than it used to be.
Yeah,
For 20, 30 years, the cork manufacturers
were getting away with murder.
They were getting away with murder. The
Absolutely.
corks were terrible. They denied it. They blamed everybody except themselves. Finally, about 10 years ago, they started finally to wake up,
question.
and they are improving the quality. Question is, it may be too late.
It may be.
The market may just be going away from them.
It is going away.
It is. No, there's no question.
Yeah.
But, even in the United States, the world market right now is still about 2/3 cork.
Which is scary if you think of what it was 15 years ago.
When it was 98%.
That's right.
Yeah, so there's been a big shift, without a doubt. Whether it's going to continue or not. What the cork people are really terrified about is the possibility that they will be able to maintain the top market. You know,
That's exactly what's going to happen.
But they can't stay in business if they lose they only keep the top 5% of the market and lose the bottom 95%. They're going to be out of business.
I think you're right, and I think that's what's going to happen. And I think they'll probably keep the top 15% of the market is what I in my own intuition gut feel.
Yeah.
8 to 12 to 15. I mean, it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Freemark Abbey. What do you think about those guys? Have you drank them in the past? What do you know about them?
I've drunk with them several times.
Have you
the
had
interesting thing about Freemark Abbey was they were the only winery in Paris that had two wines. They had a Chardonnay and a Cabernet.
Yep. And how did they do?
The winemaker at that point was a great guy. He's still alive. Has been making wine in Portugal the last few years by the name of Jerry Looper. In fact, he trained the winemaker who's there now. And Looper is just one of the real giants.
I know. I mean, one of the first shows I've ever did of Wine Library TV, Mott, before you were even taping, we did Looper's Portuguese project. I mean, I'm talking like episode 15.
Quinta de Carolina.
That's right.
That's named after his wife.
That's right. So I'm a big fan and very look up to what he's done and accomplished.
They have had a lot of the same problems, really, that Chalon had. They've been
roller coaster.
This roller coaster, and they've been through 2 or 3 owners over the years.
No question.
And I don't know why wine owners can't can't go into these situations and let people just do their thing, keep them.
They want their 2 cents in there.
But they ended up screwing things up. I mean, how many times has it been screwed up? I mean, what's going to happen to Mondavi? I'm fearful. It's
well, because it loses the family edge.
Yes, yeah.
Let's get this a snippy
the passion.
Kind of like this nose quite a bit.
Yeah, it's.
I get a
90? Parker really good.
Yeah, Parker liked it. I mean, it's got a good sense of subtle oak. I get a little cedar box. I also get really interesting dried cranberries on the nose, like a dried kind of like herbaceous cranberries, like a cranberry straw salad. Like mixing the two together. Yeah. You picking up anything else in the nose?
A little cigar box, maybe.
A little bit, right? Yeah. I think so. I like this nose. This nose is very good, actually.
Yeah. It's very mellow.
Yeah, it's not very, that over-oaked vanilla California thing that you get sometimes from Napa. Let's give it a whirl.
Am I allowed to spit into the Giants' head?
Yes! Giants! Are you a Giants fan?
No.
Who do you like? Anybody? You're a football fan?
Well, I live in New England now. And so...
Mott, turn off the camera! Turn the lights off!
Hey, come on, I'm suffering this year. I am really suffering. I've been suffering from the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you're really
Super Bowl of last year has been solid
You've only won 3 Super Bowls in the last 6 years and go to the AFC Championship game every year. You went undefeated last year, George. Until the end. Mott is a big Giant fan, so he's feeling good about himself.
For the last 15 seconds.
I get an enormous...
Nuttiest game the world has ever seen.
Unbelievable. I hate both teams so much that it just breaks my heart to even talk about this. I get really heavy levels of cassis on this wine on the mid palate. I get great blueberries and black currant on the back end. It is a hair too oaky for me. How about for your palate? Because it's not super oaky, but I'm very sensitive to it. Is it too oaky for you or no?
No, it's not.
You like the balance of it?
Yeah, I think it's very balanced.
It's got good tannin structure, not too bitter.
Yeah.
What do you think about it? Solid?
Again, I think at the price range, it's a pretty good wine.
They're both kind of fair. You're right. There's so many $40 California wines.
Yeah, I mean, jeepers. Everybody in California,
Cheapers.
That's the rot gut. It's $40. This is $27. They're a lot out of fashion these days. I mean, at the time of the Paris tasting, they were, high-end wines, really some of the best known and everything.
And when I got into the business, let's say 92 to 99, I mean, right up to about the 2000, these were huge, especially in the mid-90s, these were two monstrous brands, especially Chalon. I mean, Chalon was in the breadth of Montelena, Gergage, Ferrari Carano, Sonoma-Cutrer. These were the 5 or 6 names that people would come in long before they talked about Rudd or Ramey or Peter Michael or any of this Kistler stuff. These were the brands.
Yeah.
To me, on this palate, Maniacs, I like it. This is a solid wine. I think a lot of people out there would like this. And if you want to support or drink Napa Valley Cab, this is probably a good play for the price point. It's a hair oaky for me, so I'm going to go 89 points. But I think Parker's, again, in range. Big ups to Spectator and Parker, at least with my palate today, really within the same range. Solid wines. I mean, again, for me, I'd love to notch that 2 down to a 1. I'd love to pay 17 and 11. Then I get really excited. But not too bad.
Yeah, but Montelena, you're going to be paying $110, $120 for that.
George, let me do a little housekeeping real quick. The secret pack for Christmas. I'm announcing it, Mott. Mott, zoom in on the box. Come on. $75.99 and free shipping. 4 bottles plus an extra secret little gift. Thank you for. If as many of you that ordered a Thanksgiving pack ordered the Christmas pack, we're going to have a boatload of you on Christmas together, tasting along. So, Mott, link that up. Mott, please link up both of George's books. Let's give a huge birthday shout-out. One day late, I didn't tape yesterday. Yesterday's wasn't the same day I taped it. To Anthony Serrano, who's a big Vaniac long time, and Clay Casey, happy birthday as well. And I will see a lot of you tomorrow in San Francisco. I have a book signing at 1, and then we have the wine tasting at Fort Mason at 6. Mott, if you can link those up, so 2 the pack, we're up to 5. So that's a lot of linking up for Mr. Mott today. George, anything else? Anything else fascinating you? You're running a 3rd book.
Yeah, I'm doing a 3rd book, and it's going to be on wine tourism around the world. I traveled to 12 countries.
So wait a minute, let's be honest here. You probably came up with that concept to get them to fly you around. Is that true?
Oh, come on. This was hard work. I mean, you have to go to Tuscany, and you got to go to Margaret River.
You enjoyed it?
Yes. Yeah,
and
it was.
What was the biggest eye-opener? What's the biggest, before, we don't want to give away the book completely, but was there anything that really kind of caught you off guard?
I think the Pinot Noirs from Central Otago. I absolutely fell in love with them. I went to Central Otago as in every country, I picked out one region. I didn't, because you can't do you could do a whole book on wine tourism in France.
Sure.
So I just picked out one region, and the more I studied it and talked to people, it really turned out that Central Otago was the most interesting place to be, because they also have adventure tourism there, and they have all these wild things. That's where they invented.
Did you bungee jump?
I bungee jumped.
You did?
Yes.
I told you it was cool.
Oh, you got to put my bungee jump on video on your show.
Video?
I've got a video.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
Mott, link that up. You'll show us right now. We'll get it linked up.
I'll have to send it. I know where it is. I got it at home.
But it's on YouTube, or you have it on a disc?
I've got it on a disc. It's digital.
Fine. Send it to me. We'll link it up in the future. Yeah. We'll get it in a future episode. That is tremendous. Yeah. When is the book coming out?
It'll be out just about this time next year. Okay, unfortunately, publishers take off forever to do something. Yeah,
George, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary.
Every guest gets to ask the question of the day. Okay. So, fire to the Vaniacs out there, your question of the day. Anything. Could be about anything.
What's your favorite closure, and have you changed over the last 2 or 3 years?
Solid. My prediction, Jets 30, 49ers 13. We're angry and we're pissed. And that's the same thing.
You should be.
You, be careful. With a little bit of me, we're changing the wine world.